Hi everybody, welcome back to JD Does Dev. In this video, we're going to start looking at another project and another scenario for using Docksal in the real world. So let's get started. For our next project, we're going to be working with Docker files. Now here's our scenario. The front-end team is using a theme that is shared across multiple projects as a starter kit. In order to reduce compatibility errors, they've requested that the Docksal setup accounts for this by locking to a specific version of Node.js and NPM so they don't have to completely overhaul the NPM dependencies. Now, to do this, we're going to create a custom Dockerfile that extends out a Docksal image and add a few things to lock it in. So let's switch over to our editor. If you've been paying attention, you can see that we're using the same project that we were working on before. This is what we're going to use to build off of. Now, to begin with, we're going to create a custom Dockerfile that extends the default CLI image within our project. We're going to create that at Docksal services CLI Dockerfile. So you can see that doesn't exist yet, so we'll have to add it in. We are, brand new file, nothing in it. Now, what we want to do is extend our current image, which, if you remember from the previous sections, is the CLI 2.11 PHP 7.3. So we do that by adding from right here. Now, this tells Docksal that we still want to use this image, but we're going to do something more with it. Now, another thing that we need to do to make it safe is make sure that we're running everything as the Docker user, not as root. Now, if we were to use the root user, then we'd have a bunch of permission problems and we wouldn't be able to use anything when we try to spin up a site with our container. Now, we've got a pretty long list of commands here to get everything running and lock in the version of Node.js and NPM. I'm just going to paste them in here, then we'll go through it. So let's run through what each of these lines does. The first line here, run set e. This is saying that we're going to run some commands, and set e says that we're going to exit these commands if anything returns a non-zero value. 0 is good, that means things ran. Anything not 0 means that there was a problem. Now we're going to initialize our user environment, and this home variable is pretty standard for most bash systems, and that's your .profile file that's built in, very similar to your bashrc or zshrc, depending on what you use. Now we're going to lock in a couple versions of things, and we're going to remove the unwanted version. We're adding in 8.11.0, and we're going to uninstall 10.16.3. You set the alias, we're using that, and we just got rid of it, the one that we didn't want. Now we're going to install our packages. We're going to install the npm package 6.1.0 globally within our container. We're going to clear our cache, and we're going to do this just to make sure that NPM doesn't complain about permissions. So there's a lot going on here, but it is pretty straightforward. And one thing I want you to notice, that every line except the last ends with a semicolon and this backslash. Now, when Docker runs a Dockerfile, everything between here and the end of the line is run as a single command. So if we don't have this semicolon, then it would just read it as set.e.homeprofile, etc., etc. And the backslash here is just to make things a little bit more readable so we don't have to have it all in one line. Now that we've installed and locked the correct version of Node and NPM, we want to return our control to the root user. We do that by user root. And that's it for our Dockerfile. Here's where we tell Docksal that we have a custom Dockerfile. We're going to go into our Docksal YAML after we save this file. And we're going to make a couple little changes here. We want to use a different image. So we're going to tell Docksal we want the image. And we're going to name it this variable. Compose project namespace is the name of your project. The image is going to be named for us Docksal Training Projects CLI, which is exactly what we want. And now we're going to tell Docksal where to find our new Dockerfile. So we do that by saying build services CLI. Save that. Now, if you have an eagle eye, you probably noticed that I forgot something right up here. PHP. If we don't add in that PHP and we just put the 7.3, it's not going to know which image to call down. So now that we've got that corrected, let's go ahead and see what happens when we run FinUp. Okay, so we're getting a couple red lines, but these are perfectly acceptable. This one is just saying that it's looking for something in our .profile file that doesn't exist, and just a security warning. Now, there are some vulnerabilities with this version of NPM, which is fine. We're just doing this as an example, but if you're doing anything similar to this on your own, be sure to use a more secure version. Of course, we get this nice little warning here. You're using force. I sure hope you know what you're doing. I always think that's funny every time I see it. So everything's run, and we've got it. We've got our brand new image ready to go with our locked-in versions of Node and NPM. Up next, we're going to put a couple things together and have some fun customizing a pretty big project. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you learned something, I sure did. And in the next one, we're going to be taking on a pretty big project. So be sure to check it out. And if you don't mind, look on down a little bit and click the like and the share button. Feel free to subscribe and leave a comment if you have any questions or if there's anything that you'd like to see me cover. I'm JD, and this is JD Does Dev.